So yeah, I was given the topic of ag tech, simple as that. What's your favourite bit of ag tech? Yeah, mine's my phone, without a doubt. It's just amazing what you can do on your phone, farming. I can switch on the irrigation, monitor the soil moisture, look at things, and I don't even have to go there. In fact, I think with all this ag tech, the bottom line is, why do people get into it? I think it's mostly to save time and labour, not necessarily increase productivity and all that sort of stuff, even though that's promoted for it. The adopters are really on about saving time. So here's when I left the University of New England. My first job was to do a project for the Caterpillar company, the yellow tractors, when they introduced the rubber track tractor. You ever seen a rubber track tractor? Well, you should have, because they were introduced in 1990 for the first time in Australia. And the farm I worked for was a corporately owned farm owned by National Mutual at the time. We're interested in reducing soil compaction. So they wanted to have a track tractor. You all know that if you have tracks, they use less compaction than a tyre. It's like your Blunderstone boot and a stiletto heel, isn't it, on the kitchen floor? So that's a 24-metre rig, so it was double the size of the standard operation back in those days. We all thought this was pretty fancy, and hydrous ammonia, which, and then we used to monitor the soil moisture with neutron probe, and you can kind of see the results. This was ag tech back then. We thought this was the bee's knees. And now you look at this and think, well, we don't use anhydrous ammonia because it's not good for the soil. This was just too big and heavy. And the neutron moisture meter, which you'll soon learn, is fantastic. Probably the best thing we still have for measuring the soil moisture, but we don't like it because it's too labour intensive. So ag tech over the years, the John Deere plough, 1837, steel. One bit of data, that's why I asked you, I was asking what you might have had. First cotton gin, around about 1862, the Industrial Revolution was well before that. Cotton gin comes from the word engine. The nitrogen fertiliser manufacturer, urea, around about 1912, so only about 100 years ago, a bit more now. I'd strongly recommend you look at this website of Roth if you're interested in science and that sort of thing. In the 1840s they discovered superphosphate. 1919 they invented what we call statistics. So if you've ever done an experiment the way we do it now, having a control, randomisation and replication, pretty basic now, but that's when that all started. And they also have the world's longest farming, both cropping and pasture experiments, and they're well worth a look at. Aerial spraying, 1922, the Roth family from Mudgee. Our claim to fame, we're winemakers, and this was our claim to fame. Our innovative winemaking press. Look at the size, it's about the size of that table, and now they'll be the size of the room. 65 years ago, we started breeding wheat in Narrabri. There was no wheat basically in the northwest New South Wales 60 odd years ago. There's only 30,000 acres. Now there's 1.5 million hectares. It's probably the biggest industry in the northwest. And it's largely because of the adoption of varieties that are suited to this part of the world. I love this one. This is my favourite innovation, polypipe. I don't know a farmer who doesn't have some polypipe. Whether we're a cotton farmer with this sort of stuff, an orchardist or a vineyard with drip irrigation, or just a grazier connecting a pump to a tank or a water trough or something like that. There's a very famous movie called The Graduate in 1960 starring Dustin Hoffman and Mrs. Robinson. You might know it. It's a great future in plastics. That's what the movie's famous for, that quote. And it's Simon and Garfunkel songs. But great bit of innovation. I remember 88, 90, round about then when the Gulf War started, we couldn't work out how they got those missiles down the chimneys during the Gulf War. Do you remember those pictures? It was all due to GPS. So that's not that long ago either. So you put that into crop yields over time. This is wheat in Australia. I mentioned, the phenology and farrow. We used to grow wheat in the summer, now we grow it in the winter. The introduction of superphosphate, yields started to go up, improved pastures. The introduction of these semi-dwarf wheat varieties we have now. So yields have gone up over time. And more locally, if you look at the cotton industry story, what a fantastic result that is of innovation and adoption. Now, just the continual onwards and upwards in yield over time. And then some innovations, the introduction of synthetic pyrethroids or mortine. You'll see this in all the graphs around the world. There was a short-term rise in yields, and then the insects developed resistance. I'm seeing Colin Tan here, so I'm very nervous talking about insects while he's in the room. But that was an innovation at the time, variety, resistance, the expansion of biotechnology crops or GM cotton, and yields have just keep going and going. So there's a lot of different types of ag tech is all I'm trying to point out here. So ag tech now can be on farm or off farm. And as I said, the one I use the most is the Bureau of Meteorology, looking at the weather and that sort of thing. That's a pretty cool there's a lot of technology there that you do on your phone every day probably, or your iPad or whatever, and you can look at soil maps and NDVI, etc. Soil moisture. As Landcarers, you obviously have an interest in measuring soil moisture. Tremendous advances. These days, mostly capacitance probes, 80% adoption in cotton. But we're moving to an era of plant-based sensing. It's much harder to measure the plants, their response to the environment, but we're kind of moving into that era. And if you're an orchardist or a vineyard grower, you can measure the sap flow in your tree or your vine. And you think about it's the transpiration rate, the water and nutrients going up the stem, and convert that into litres per day. And then you know exactly how many litres per day to put on. So this can all be done, and by any of you tomorrow. So you just need to do your research. The most confusing part will be who you're going to buy it off. And my message is there, the person who services you the best. So pay a bit more for it because you will need the service. And you've probably seen these sort of graphs of moisture over time in a capacitance probe. This will be either rainfall events got wetter, or irrigations. So different depths in the soil. Those moisture capacitance probes, which a lot of people don't realise, can also measure the soil temperature, which is what the bottom graph is. They have to do that to calculate the water use, and they can also measure salinity if you're interested in that. It's just the providers don't necessarily provide that information unless you ask them for it. But it will do it, a capacitance probe. Whereas if you're a Landcare group and just want something, a soil moisture, a digital ag tech soil moisture sensor, because these are $1,000 each roughly. You might want a portable thing that you can share. You might want to buy a theta probe or something like that. It's very accurate in the top 30 centimetres that you can just go and push it into the ground, pull it out, push it in the ground, etc., and then give it to someone else next week and you get it back the week after. So there's a lot of different types of sensors. I'm happy to provide you a reference book for them. Now, on our farm, that's our farm, it's 2,500 hectares at Narrabri, 60% cropping, sort of 30% grazing and 10% remnants. We've been monitoring the wildlife, so with cameras and sensors, and I all of a sudden discovered I'm sharing the place with a lot more people than I really realised. The place is pretty busy at night in particular, and we've been tracking that with cameras and sensors which are in the different parts of the farm. So this is all ag technology. Some of it's pretty simple, but some of it's not so simple. So Andrew Watson alluded to the bat monitoring of Heidi. And a similar thing, we've had these network of sensors. This one's listening to the birds, this one's listening to the bats, and this camera's taking a photograph of whatever happens to wander by, whether it's a wild pig, fox, or kids on push bikes. And we discovered, which we did not know, 5 threatened species of bats on our farm at Narrabri. We didn't even know we had them, which was quite a revelation to us. We've all heard. So that's pretty cool because our forest, I wouldn't say it's exactly an exciting forest. It looks like the Pilliga scrub. It's a Pilliga sort of forest. It was really quite cool to know we've had that. And since then, the DPI have come along and installed some artificial roosts to see if they can create some habitats to see if that enhances the bat population. But that was just an example that Andrew also alluded to. The one we have been tracking with ag tech is feral pigs. Never met a farmer that's not interested in feral pigs. It's certainly out our way. So we put a GPS collar on 10 pigs and monitored them for a couple of years with our neighbours, and we're right on the edge of the Mount Caputar National Park. And the real take-home learning is that the pigs weren't really coming out of the national park. They were really just living on our properties and staying there and whining and dining on our properties. Every now and then one would wander up to the, every now and then, but by and large you can see they're here on the farms. Now the green is the winter, and then we noticed in the summer they just sort of migrated down to this part of the property. But it was interesting. It's the old measure to manage thing. Now you could obviously put a different sort of sensor now on a sheep or a cow. There are digital sensors to do that. If you're interested, livestock's not my specialty, I would just read the fine print. That's what I'd be encouraging you if you're interested, because some of those sensors are not quite as accurate as some of them claim. So there's a couple of companies, but you just need to read the fine print, talk to the person that's selling them or providing them, and work out which one's best for you. Because it's quite different if you want to track a cow in a Northern Territory paddock to a paddock maybe in the New England, which is only 20 hectares in size and where it's been. You're going to need a different level of accuracy. Now, you've all seen maps like this of precision agriculture and farming, and the most common thing I hear from farmers is, I can't make sense of it. It's just a pretty picture. Now, these are yield maps of cotton, I think, but what you can do now with artificial machine learning is train it to look at all the different layers of your map. So these maps, so this one's pH, salinity, exchangeable sodium percentage, depressions, furrows, cut and fill. So you end up with all these different maps, and this is what people say, I can't work out what's going on. So it's not that difficult now to say to a computer, just put all that together for me and give me the answer. That's what you just want the answer. That's all I want. I'm a simple bloke. I just want the answer. And so there's the answer. Put it all in, and you can just produce a map of the most limiting thing. What's limiting the yield in that particular paddock? So in this part of the paddock, it's the yellow, it's the pH. In this part of the paddock, it's the exchangeable sodium percentage. In the green, it's the cut and fill. So I've now got a map of the most limiting factor, which is different across that whole paddock. So now I'm going to go and do whatever, aren't I? What's yellow? Address the pH there, address the cut and fill here, or address the ESP here. That can all be done. Even if I do it the old-fashioned way, sort of somehow manually, or get some sort of variable rate, whatever, and have a crack. But all I'm saying is to you, this is sort of now possible, and if you're tinkering in this space, there are plenty of people who can help you. I like to see things, so cameras, you can definitely do that with ag tech. I can pull out the phone now and look at things on the property. Around Narrabri we use Oz Forecast. There's a lot of weather stations, and a few of them have cameras, and and you can look at things, which is good. It's always visual. Now I've changed stripes with the tractor company. I'm doing a project with the green tractor these days, John Deere, but they've got some fantastic technology, ag tech, which is not surprising, being one of the biggest agricultural companies in the world. What they call precision weed control. So this tractor's going along, it's got cameras and sensors out on the boom, and it's spot spraying. So it's detecting the weeds out, the little weeds out there, detecting them, and then spot spraying them. And out the other end, here's the map of what it's sprayed and what it hasn't sprayed. So that's a tremendous advancement in less chemical use, more specific application of chemicals, the right chemical. You're not going to be too far away from having two chemicals in the back of your spray rig and squirting one weed with one and squirting another weed with another, or squirting do you get the gist? The variable rate. That is not that far away. So this is the precision weed control system, and they're all, having a camera of some sort on a spray rig is quite common really these days. If you don't want to buy an expensive one, for $350 you can make your own. And Guy Coleman at Sydney Uni and Co, they kind of have this one here. You probably can't get that now, but I'll give it to you later. How you can just go and buy a few bits and pieces and make your own. Put it on the back of a ute or a quad bike or something and make your own spot sprayer and have a crack. Could be something for some of you to think about. Now drones. Drones are the most overrated bit of technology we have. How about that? They make great newspaper headlines, They are fantastic for taking photographs and doing images. They are fantastic. Just ask David Attenborough. They are fantastic for that. But, and I've got a couple of applications I think where drones are useful in agriculture, but one of them is, spraying weeds. So we did a trial spraying Nagura burrs, in our case in a creek where we definitely couldn't drive the tractor. There's no way. It was after the big flood in 2020. So the only thing out here were the feral pigs, really. So we did a comparison of a helicopter and a drone, and that was pretty interesting in April 2020. But if you're in New England, you can get a drone and send it up a hill and spray a blackberry, for example. I think that's an application that has got a lot of merit. In 2020, this was cheaper and more cost-effective for our big area, but I have a feeling these days, because these are better, more efficient, bigger, it would be horses for courses now. We're 3 years down the road. So another one, Andrew, I don't know if you spoke about it, but dropping beneficial insects out of a drone into crops is another potential application. He would have spoken about cotton, but I definitely know people doing vineyards. So that's another example. We're using a drone for plant stand, because something very important for cropping is plant stand. If you don't have the plants to start with, you're not going to get a high yield. So we wanted to, we're doing another trial, John Deere, with a precision planter. But, if you drill in with the drone, you can see every individual plant. Now, this is an example of a poor plant stand, obviously. But it's really good for that sort of thing, mapping your plant stand. Because if you're a US corn farmer, their cornfields, it'll all be every dot, exactly the same distance apart, and also lined up that way, a bit like the military. It can all be done, precision planting. And also the planters now can do different depths and at different rows and that sort of thing. But the drone is very useful for mapping that. You counted something like 640,000 plants. Think how long that would take you to do. Now, that's the only livestock example I've got of ag tech, but the OptiWay, bit of local technology and a fantastic bit of technology. From weighing the cattle on the run. So we've been using that, no doubt many others have, but it's a really good example, a bit of ag tech, where you can, over time, get your live weights in kilograms per head or whatever you need to do. And we've found that, hopefully others have, we've found that as a great piece of ag tech, and we use it not only in our commercial herd, but also in our research trials. Now, getting it all together is one of the challenges. Now, it's a bit like, what's the analogy? So we use a company we use AgWorld software for our cropping and AgriWeb for our livestock. That's our record keeping process. I'm not sure if you're using something else, there's plenty of others, or you might still be using the notebook, but whatever. These are great tools, but it's a bit like, and what we want to do, we've got other packages for looking at the soil moisture sensors, so they're with the companies we get them from, and likewise the sap flow sensors from a different company, and the cameras are a different company, so we've got all these different platforms. And really, at the end of the day, you want a dashboard like the cockpit where you can see the lot. And that's the old way, obviously, and we want this, and this is coming. There's an example of one company where they produce and integrate data from all the sensors, and you just pay the service and you can get your dashboard. So I think this is what's changing now, right now in 2023. It's a bit like, I guess, if you remember Microsoft, you have a Microsoft file and you couldn't put it in a Mac, or vice versa. The companies didn't want to talk to each other, did they? And then they figured out, well, hang on, it's probably better that they do talk because it makes it all more compatible. And I think that's where a lot of the ag tech is. A lot of the providers are realising that there are synergistic benefits to be kind of working with others and collaborating. And we're just going through that phase now. You're seeing a lot more evidence of that, where compatibility of data and data sources. So that's changing very rapidly, and it's going to make it so much easier for all of us. So I'm getting towards the end of ag tech of the future. So we've kind of showed you a bit of the present. There's plenty of this stuff, but I just came up with a short list. I could have a long list. One was middle infrared soil testing on the go. I thought that'd be interesting to Landcare groups. Most of your soil testing is done by you getting a sample, putting it in a paper bag and sending it off to a lab, which is then tested with wet chemistry, and a fortnight later you get results. Very good, but we're not very far away from middle infrared testing of soil on the go. So you get a little sample, put it into the middle infrared sensor, and it will tell you the nutrient content and other attributes of the soil straight away. We can do that in Narrabri now, and so I think this is not far away at all. It's very similar. What's the analogy to if you're a grain farmer, you send your wheat off and you want to know the protein content, you stick it in what's called a phos machine. It tells you the protein content of your wheat straight away on the near infrared. So this is soil testing. That's just one ag tech for the future. You're going to hear a lot about artificial intelligence for weeds and herbicides. I gave you one example. It's not my forte, but I think you already know about it. Chat GPTs and these sort of things. There's going to be a lot of this artificial intelligence in agriculture. I'll come back to the yellow one because that's my favourite. Robotic weeding, smarter irrigation technologies, animal tracking technologies, and robotic picking of fruit and vegetables. A lot of these things are aimed at reducing labour costs. But the one that I think that I'm going to see before I retire is autonomous tractors. That will be like the GM cotton, the John Deere round baler, those two things, close to 80-90% adoption in very short period of time. Autonomous tractors, I think, will be the next one. And you've all heard that various companies are tinkering in them. They're not that far away. There are obviously some issues, but they're going to be game changers. Where they're driving over here, the councillors with the mayors are all on the radio talking about how there's a shortage of people and too many jobs, they can't fill, that sort of thing. Autonomous tractors and machinery. Now, that'll either be a driverless tractor, like the tractor you see, it just won't have a driver in it, or if you're interested and you haven't seen them, Andrew Bay's Swarm Farm robots are a good example of a big machine that's autonomous, that can spray an area, from me to the back wall, go up and down. So it's a big machine, not a little toy by any means. So that's the Swarm Farm robot, and you'll see the big tractor companies come out with their competitors in 1 to 2 years' time. But they won't all be big, and I think that's the thing we need to think about. They will also be little bots, if you like. And this could be like a little thing that goes and plants one row at a time and have a whole heap of them. In this case, planting, for example. So I think we'll see both. I think it's just the autonomous driving will come first and will be quite a game changer, at least in the cropping areas of northwest New South Wales. There'll be lots of others, but I just wanted to conclude. Now here's an image from the Australian cotton grower in 1991 of basically a drone image. So it's taken 40 years, not 40? 30 years, 1990, we got it right? To 30, thanks. 30 years to kind of get to where we are with that imagery. And the main change has been GPS and the computers that drive it all. Taking the actual image is, and the technology there hasn't changed that much at all. So my message is, and if you look like you're from the generation that will remember the famous Pantene shampoo ads, do you remember them? What was it? It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. And that's it. There's a lot of people over-promising some of this ag tech that's you can take it tomorrow and get on with it. And there are a few examples of those that you can, but I think there's a few others that you need to be a little bit more patient with. Thanks very much.
To what extent is all this technology helping to reduce chemical runoff into our rivers and streams?
Well, the precision sprayers claim to reduce chemical use by 70 to 90%. So obviously if you're using less, that's going to be less runoff. Yeah, that's That's one answer to that question. So more, yeah. But I think more accurate measuring of the weather, for example, wind speed in particular. So in northwest New South Wales, there's a major issue out there to do with pesticide spray drift, 2,4-D mostly. And so trying to minimise that drift. So yeah, you know, there are technologies that are going to try and potentially help do that. I'm not saying that that's the solution. Personally, I think the solution is the person applying it being a bit more pragmatic about what they're doing and when. But you asked me about the technology side of it. Yeah, but that's one example anyway, that precision spraying.
Yeah, look, I've got a young fellow, 13-year-old, and he likes driving the tractor. And I'm just wondering where he's fitting into this possibility.
Well, I'll send you the link on the John Deere website of the farmer who has the autonomous tractor talking just about that. And he's basically saying, I used to spend all my day in the tractor. I didn't spend my time with my family and this and that and this and that. And I have a feeling that will answer your question. Yeah, I don't. Now, I'm changing the subject a little bit, but with students enrolling in agriculture at Sydney Uni and no doubt UNE and Charles Sturt Uni, students today don't want to sit on tractors. They want to do other things. And there's a fantastic, I'd highly recommend it, there's a talk by the head of agriculture at Barker College talking about what students are interested in agriculture and what interests them. And he's saying at their school, it's not actually leading the sheep and the cow or driving the tractor, it's all the other stuff that related to agriculture, the food technology side, how it's produced and that sort of thing. But the answer, yeah, I'll have to send you the link and show you the little video link. Yeah. Because, yeah, just do that too. Obviously the thing is still going to need to be looked after. You're just not going to sit over at the coast and turn it on. You're going to need to be in the vicinity of it. It's going to need monitoring, checking, and those sorts of things. You just won't have to sit on it.